Everyone. I'll kick off the meeting. I see 51 people so far. That's a very good number. I guess it has to do with the importance of the topic tonight. I'd like to welcome everybody to this presentation panel from Chelsea Reform Democrats and remind you that tonight is only half the presentation. We're going to have another presentation, same topic, on Monday, this coming Monday, same time, same place, same Zoom invitation. Monday, 7 o'clock, second presentation. And I said, welcome everybody. And I want you to be aware, if you aren't, that Chelsea Reform Democrats is coming Sunday. And everyone here and your friends are invited. It's at the Hudson Guild on 4441 West 26th Street. It's close to 10th Avenue. And it's between 3 and 6 in Sunday afternoon. So I hope you could all be there and bring friends. Okay, Leila, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Bert. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. As our Vice President Bert Lazarin just mentioned, we actually have now 52 participants on this call, which really shows the great interest that the topic carries for our community. I am Leila Liso. I am the district leader for Assembly District 75 Part A, which represents Chelsea. And it is my great pleasure and honor to moderate this conversation tonight. As Bert mentioned, this is a two-part event, and tonight we are joined by representatives from NYCHA, Essence, as well as the presidents of the tenants associations for the two campuses that we're going to discuss, as well as the tenant. I will introduce all of the speakers in greater detail. As you all know, we are here tonight to talk about the redevelopment of the NYCHA campuses in Chelsea, Fulton houses, as well as Elliott, Chelsea, and Annex houses. Few words about how the meeting is going to proceed. We will get a presentation from the NYCHA representative who is here with us tonight. Following this presentation, which is going to be pretty thorough, we wanted to make sure that it is an opportunity for all to get the information. Some of you who are steeped into this issue may find stuff that you already know. For others who are new to this topic, we felt it was important to give a little bit of a historical perspective on what has happened in the past and where we are today. Following this presentation, I will kick off the discussion with a number of questions, and then we will open up to questions from you participants. The goal is really for as many of you as possible to ask your questions and get more clarity about what is happening at this, at these sites, and what this redevelopment project entails. The goal here is really to provide information. We understand that it is a very, very complicated topic and a very controversial topic, which is why we decided to have two events. Tonight is an opportunity for those who are in favor of this plan to express their position. And then, as Bert mentioned, on December 4th, Monday, December 4th at 7 p.m., we will have another event at which participants and speakers who are opposed to this project will have an opportunity to share their views and make their case. The goal really tonight and on Monday is not to have a heated debate. The goal is really to hear the facts and understand the perspectives of each side of this issue. We take great care in listening and making sure that all the voices are heard. For that reason, we will ask that you limit your question to 30 seconds. I know it sounds really short, but it is totally doable. And we will ask the speakers to answer in 90 seconds. We will not hold it hold you up to it, with a timer. But really, the goal here, once again, is for as many people as possible to have a chance to speak, ask their questions, and this is really an opportunity to gather facts. This is really important. We understand that there is a great need also for people to express their opinions, and we understand that we will organize events that will provide this very purpose. But tonight, the goal is really to get facts and get those who are in favor to express their viewpoint. Once again, there will be an opportunity for those who oppose the proposal to voice their concern and to express their opinion on Monday, December 4th. So without further ado, let's get going. Let's get starting. I'm going to introduce the speakers to you tonight. We are joined by Simon Kivitsky of NYCHA. I hope I didn't butcher your last name, Simon. We
That was
are
perfect.
Thanks. We are also joined by Mona Lee, who is with Essence, representing the developer who would be developing these two campuses. We are joined by Miguel Acevedo, president of the Tenants Association for Fulton Houses. I believe Darlene Waters is also with us. Darlene is the president of the Tenants Association for Elliott Chelsea Houses. And we are also joined by Michael Noble, who is a tenant of the campuses. So Simon, I'm going to turn it to you. You're going to give us a presentation. This presentation will be full and uninterrupted. The floor will be yours, and then we will kick off the conversation, and each speaker will have an opportunity to introduce themselves after Simon's presentation concludes. So Simon, we can see your screen, and we are ready to listen to your presentation.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to present tonight and share information about this exciting project. I'm going to do the first half of the presentation, then pass it to Mona, who's going to walk through the specifics of the proposed project. I will start just by giving a little bit of an overview about the Pact program. Well, just to take a step back to introduce myself. So again, my name is Simon Kowitsky. I am a vice president in the real estate development department here at NYCHA, and I oversee our community planning and resident engagement efforts across the Pact program. Pact is an initiative that was created at NYCHA in 2016 to bring comprehensive repairs to our developments across the city. We have made a commitment to use the program to fully modernize a third of our housing stock, or approximately 62,000 apartments all across the city by the end of this decade. And the interesting thing about Pact, and if some of you have been following the trajectory of the Fulton and Elliott Chelsea project over the years, we had initially anticipated using this program to provide for a comprehensive rehabilitation of the existing buildings, but Pact can also provide for redevelopment or new construction as well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how that's going to work and how it provides not only high quality modern apartments for our residents, but also protects their rights per federal regulations. So all across the city, NYCHA has found itself in a really unfortunate situation in that we assess that we need approximately $78 billion to fully modernize our housing stock, bring it into a good state of repair, provide safe, healthy, affordable homes for our residents. The way that public housing is funded through the federal government is not sufficient to allow for this level of investment in our buildings. What HUD, the federal government that regulates housing authorities, did under the Obama administration in 2011 is it formed an initiative called RAD, Rental Assistance Demonstration. And the goal of this program was to allow for the transition from The traditional public housing program, which is also known as Section 9, that has funded public housing over the past 8 decades or so, to a different funding source called project-based Section 8. Project-based Section 8 is different from public housing in that the funding stream is more stable, and it has been consistently funded at a higher level by Congress over the years, whereas public housing has declined in terms of the value of dollars provided. When the federal government created this program, the goal was to promote public-private partnerships. RAD is the program that we utilize and implement here under the name Pact. RAD and Pact, you'll hear the two terms, they're interchangeable. Pact is just our local implementation of the RAD program. And so to facilitate the utilization of this more valuable source of funding, we partner with private organizations, developers who can leverage that income stream to provide for financing and other sources of funding to fully modernize the housing. HUD requires that in exchange for allowing us to transition to this better source of funding, we are in fact showing them how we are going to fully modernize these buildings, as well as protect all of the existing rights and protections that our residents benefit from. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but again, this program depends on partnerships with private organizations. In the Pact model, that means that we work closely with developers, property managers, general contractors, and also service providers who provide enhanced social services on site. The way that it works is that NYCHA continues to maintain ownership of the land and the buildings. In this case, it would be maintaining ownership of the land. We'll get more into that in a little bit. We ground lease the properties to these private partners. They conduct all of the repairs or the new construction that's required and laid out in the agreement and as approved by HUD. They also take over the property management from NYCHA. So the overall day-to-day responsibility for the maintenance and upkeep of the property moves from NYCHA to the new private property manager. And then we also require our partners to bring in enhanced services. So this looks like having case managers and social workers on site to provide for whatever needs that our residents may have at that location. NYCHA's role changes. We do not step away. As I mentioned, we maintain ownership. We also maintain, through the various agreements that we pen with the partners, oversight of their performance. We make sure that we're monitoring the conditions, the work that they're doing, making sure that it's high quality, that they're responding to our residents' needs. We continue to administer the subsidy stream, the Section 8 program, as I mentioned. So really importantly, holding the purse strings is a really strong incentive for our partners to perform, in addition to being mission-driven organizations. But also really importantly, that means that we maintain the rents. We tell the partners what rents can be charged. And again, it's based on our residents' income. Any vacant apartments that become available, we tell the partner who they can rent those units to, and they're to qualified Section 8 applicants off of our wait list. There is no opportunity to deregulate units, rent them on the private market. This is a very tightly controlled program. Again, entering into a partnership with private organizations, we can benefit from their expertise and their abilities, but we maintain control in very important ways. In terms of the rights and protections that our residents preserve in going through the Pact program, these are some of the key protections that our residents care about. So really importantly, I mentioned rent continues to be calculated in the same exact way that it is today, 30% of their adjusted gross household income. Our resident associations have a right to continue organizing and to receive funding for those activities. Our residents have the right to renew their leases, same as they do today under the public housing program. Nobody is displaced or evicted as a result of this transition. The whole point of this program is to stabilize housing for our existing families. Nobody would be disqualified from participating in this program as well. So if you have applied for Section 8 in the past, you didn't qualify, your household composition, your income doesn't allow you to obtain a Section 8 voucher, It doesn't matter. As long as you're a current authorized resident at this development, when it transitions to this new program, you get to stay and benefit from all of these improvements. I'm not going to go through the rest in too much detail, but I just wanted to emphasize that all of the important rights and protections are preserved in this initiative. Family members have the right to inherit the apartment if the head of household were to move or pass on. And then really importantly, we can talk more about this in the context of Fulton and Elliott Chelsea. There's a really strong, what's known as a right to return. This is enshrined in the HUD, federal government regulations that govern this program. And they guarantee that any tenant who may be temporarily moved to facilitate a redevelopment plan such as this has a right to return to the development from which they were moved. So just for some context, the Fulton and Elliott Chelsea developments are comprised of two campuses between 9th and 10th avenues, 16th Street up to 27th Street. Together, they comprise just under 2,100 apartments. In 2019, NYCHA and resident leaders, elected officials, and local advocates convened what's known as the Chelsea NYCHA Working Group. And the goal of the working group was to look at strategies to raise funds to invest in these properties. All across the city, NYCHA is struggling to maintain its housing stock in a good state of repair, provide for safe, healthy homes for our residents. The Fulton and Elliott Chelsea developments were no exception, are no exception. There has been and continues to be an acute need to provide investments to these properties. At the time that the working group was formed, it was estimated that there was approximately $366 million worth of repairs that were needed just to stabilize these buildings, to give you a sense of the scale. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But the working group met for a little bit over a year to really look at what kinds of strategies would be most appropriate to raise money, what kinds of parameters need to be put in place to make sure that resident rights and protections are actually preserved and also enhanced in some cases. And there was also a recognition given the neighborhood that allowing for new construction could support the financial feasibility of the project and provide for other benefits for residents that maybe other developments in other parts of the city can't benefit from. So if this was something that was going to be allowed, what should that development look like? How dense, how tall, where should it be located? What affordability requirements, et cetera, should be imposed. And so the report was released in early 2021 and really laid the groundwork for what we refer to as an RFP. This allowed us to go out and procure a development partner that is Essence and related. We worked very closely with resident leaders who participated in the working group, and they were guided by the Citizens Housing and supported by the Citizens Housing and Planning Council, a nonprofit civic group, to help shape that RFP, request for proposals, and also to select the development partners. So the way that we implement the Pact program today, and at the time when this RFP was released, is that resident leaders actually get to review the proposals that are submitted by our developers, interview the developers, and actually make the selection. And the resident leaders selected Essence and Related to implement the plan. So I mentioned that, and this is a screenshot from the working group report itself that really kind of broke down the different areas of investment that were anticipated through the Pact program. At the time, it was estimated that we needed about $366 million to do so. When the development team came on board, well, let me say that these estimates are based on very rough investigations that NYCHA completed several years prior in 2017. When we were doing the working group study and providing information to all the stakeholders and participants, that was the best level of information that we had at the time. We were not going out and doing additional inspections to really corroborate and make sure that these are in fact the costs that would be the costs and the needs that would be required to stabilize the property. We took this as the assumption and move forward with identifying the partner and setting forth to go and implement these investments. When the partner team was actually onboarded, this took place at the end of 2021. Our typical PACT process includes what we call a planning phase. So you identify those partners that are going to be responsible for doing the work, and then they typically have about a year or 2 years to get on site. They get into as many apartments as they can. They conduct environmental investigations. They look at lead-based paint, asbestos. They look at the conditions of the plumbing systems, the mechanical systems, electrical, elevators, heat and hot water plants, and they refine what they put in their initial proposal based on what they're seeing. These are some photos of the living conditions that they saw when they started entering apartments. And you know, they kind of speak for themselves. Our residents had been and continue to live in really unacceptable conditions, unhealthy and unsafe conditions, open walls, mold, broken pipes, really band-aid fixes that have in a lot of ways come to characterize some of the situations that we find here at NYCHA. These are issues that really require a top to bottom investment to get at the root causes of what is actually creating these conditions. That means really stripping down the buildings to the studs, replacing all of the pipes, the electrical systems. These were some of the really, I would say, these are some situations and conditions that we were all, you know, not necessarily expecting to see. Really old original electrical panels and wiring throughout the walls, elevators that needed to be completely replaced, plumbing systems, again, that need to be completely replaced as well. I'm not going to go through this slide in too much detail, but I put it on here to just highlight these top numbers over here. So when the PACT partner was actually selected by the residents at the end of 2021, they actually escalated up from what the working group report said. So they assumed that the property would require about $487 million to renovate and stabilize. But after they had actually gotten into the site, done their investigations, looked at the units, their assessment of the need of the property had grown tremendously to over $1.1 billion, or roughly $550,000 per unit. This sounds like a really big jump, but again, remember the original assessment that the working group report was based on was actually from 2017, and we're now, you know, at this point at the end of 2022, 5 years later. And around this time, NYCHA, every 5 years, we conduct what's known as a physical needs assessment. We go and we update that assessment that we did back in 2017. We update it based on a sample of units and buildings that we've inspected and other escalators. And our finding for the Fulton Elliott Chelsea developments was actually consistent with what the development team had sent to us. So at this point, when you're approaching a cost of about $500,000 per unit of renovation, you're really talking about a cost that is on par with what it would take to completely build a brand new apartment. And so we wanted to think about, and at the same time, the development team had also proposed a new building at the Elliott and Chelsea development. This was allowed per the working group report and in the RFP itself as well. And as they started to plan for that building, it was approximately 120, 150 units. Many residents of Fulton Elliott Chelsea started to say, well, why can't we have a new building like that? That building was not originally intended for NYCHA residents. The goal of that building was to actually raise money to invest in the repairs for our existing buildings. But at this point in late 2022, the high cost of renovation, some of these sentiments that we're hearing from residents about their desire for new homes, got us thinking about different strategies that we might want to bring to the residents. And in early 2023, we did just that. So we hosted with Essence and Related dozens of meetings over the course of 3 months during the springtime of this year, where we presented 3 different options for their consideration. One was rehabilitation, and that's shown here as option 2. So we could move forward with rehabilitation as planned. It would be very expensive. It would require a lot of subsidy from the city, but we could do it. And that's something that could be considered. We could also look at 2 different reconstruction, redevelopment scenarios that's shown on the left and in the middle, option 1A and option 1B, that looked at demolishing all of the existing buildings and rebuilding them. The key difference between option 1A and option 1B was that option 1A was higher density and would also be done faster. So option 1A would require changing the land use, the underlying zoning of the sites to allow for higher density buildings, more units overall, which would allow for us to replace all of the NYCHA housing in a quicker time frame. If we were to redevelop the campuses under the existing land use framework, it would take longer because we'd be constrained in terms of the height and the bulk of the buildings, and also the level of density. So there'd be more phases required to completely replace the buildings. One of the other things, and Mona's going to speak to this a little bit as well, that we really wanted to prioritize in presenting these options, and which I think is not necessarily so clear out in the public when we're talking about this project, is that it's a primarily what we call a build first approach. So the vast majority of, under option 1A or option 1B, the vast majority of residents at these campuses would move just one time from their existing NYCHA home into their new NYCHA home. So we would be building new apartment buildings while our residents remain in their homes. They'd be across the street, they'd be in the building next door. And then once that building is completed, residents would move over once into their brand new home. Under the rehabilitation option, because of the extensive needs that we were seeing in the units, we anticipated that we were going to have to move residents out, temporarily house them somewhere on site for potentially several months, and then move them back once the work was completed. So something that residents did take to heart and thought a lot about was the convenience or inconvenience of the different scenarios. There are other benefits of building new as well. Residents were pleased about the ability to provide for fully accessible hallways and apartment layouts, multiple elevators. In some buildings today just have one elevator. When there's an outage, that's a real problem for people with mobility challenges. Rebuilding the campuses also allowed for us to create brand new community facilities and amenities. So brand new facilities for Hudson Guild at Fulton and at Elliott, Chelsea. A new facility for a healthcare center, new grocery store, and other new ground floor retail uses at both campuses along 9th Avenue. There was a survey. So as we were presenting these different options to our residents, we asked them to let us know what their preference was. Did they want the one of the new construction options? Did they want to move forward with the original rehabilitation option? And we had that survey open, multiple forms, paper, online. They could fill it out on iPads at the meetings. We also facilitated tours of other new construction properties that Related has built in New York City. This is one of them at Hunters Point South, a newly constructed building, 100% affordable. And this is the promise that Essence and Related have made to us and to our residents in terms of the quality of construction and the kinds of amenities that residents could expect out of brand new buildings at these locations. And, I think the pictures speak for themselves, but these opportunities are really exciting for our residents, NYCHA residents who have lived in conditions as you've just seen. They have lobby attendants providing security at the front door. They have mail and package rooms. They have bike rooms, fitness centers, community spaces. They have washers and dryers in every unit. And these, again, are the kinds of things that are very appealing to NYCHA and to our residents. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mona. She's going to walk through the option that residents selected. This is the option that would allow for higher density buildings in a quicker time frame. I'll also just say, because I forgot to mention it.
I'm going to follow up with the market team.
Sorry, Mona, can you just mute yourself for a second? So I also just want to say, because Mona's going to speak to this in a second, that the rebuilding scenarios that were presented to residents and that make up our current proposed approach involve the creation of a substantial amount of market rate housing. That is the only way that we can afford the construction of buildings of this quality for replacing the existing NYCHA housing that's there. And I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of, or it's anything to shy away from. By tapping into the strength of the real estate market in this neighborhood, we're able to actually invest in our housing with limited subsidy from the city of New York and really provide for this level of community building. And it's really exciting. The new market rate housing that would be built will also include permanently affordable housing per the mandatory inclusionary housing requirements, which is a city requirement. Up to 30% of all new housing that is built would be permanently affordable at low incomes. And those are units that could also be available to NYCHA residents. So I just want to make that really clear. I'll pass it to Mona to talk about the details of the selected project and our current proposed approach. So Mona.
Great. Thank you, Simon. I'm excited to be here tonight. By way of introduction, I am a developer at Essence Development. My prior life is actually working for the City of New York's planning department, where I advocated for more equitable allocation of the city's capital budget. And some of those pictures of the new affordable housing buildings that Simon showed in a couple slides ago, I personally walked our residents every single weekend for 6 weekends in a row in showing the quality of the material used, as well as the care that the related management team puts in to maintaining those buildings, and personally believe that there should not be a difference in terms of what affordable housing looks like in comparison to market rate housing, and that everyone deserves to live in healthy, safe, and accessible buildings. And so, Simon, if you could go back to the build first slide to provide a little bit more detail on the resident selected plan. As Simon mentioned, our goal is to deliver new housing for the 4,000 families that live at Fulton houses and Elliott Chelsea houses today, and to address the city's housing crisis by introducing new mixed income housing to Chelsea, which we all know is a high opportunity neighborhood in terms of its access to resources, as well as the lack of development sites available to bring substantial amounts of new housing to this area. And so how we envision this plan working is that our first focus is to build 6 new buildings for the current residents, so that the residents living in the conditions that you just saw earlier, they are able to go into healthier, safer, and more accessible homes. From a healthy homes perspective. I don't know how many of you all have walked, excuse me, don't know how many of y'all have walked into Fulton houses or Elliott Chelsea houses, but personally, when I walk in there, I do feel a difference in terms of the amount of fresh air and ventilation available. And in our new buildings, the corridors would be ventilated, and the apartments would have fresh air ventilation, even when the windows are closed. The materials that we would use would be obviously free of lead-based paint that is dangerous to children. It would be free of molds, and we would be free of asbestos-containing materials. In terms of safety, Simon mentioned earlier that many of the current buildings at Fulton houses and LA Chelsea houses do not have 2 elevator cars. Residents only have access to 1 elevator car, and when that is down, when you are in a low rise, you would have to walk down the stairs, and we would obviously not have that in our new buildings. There would be redundancy. And lastly, we care about individuals with physical disabilities, and we would make sure that there are accessible paths from the moment that you enter the building to going through the elevators, going through the hallways, and actually entering your unit where you can have the proper turning radius that you need in the bathrooms and the kitchens to move around freely. And I'll talk on top of all of that.
I'm sorry, Mona, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you start showing actually the buildings and the built environment as you speak? I know that you have some slides that basically show the location of the buildings and the massing. Sure. Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure, we can get into that.
So I just want to be mindful of time. It's already 7:40, so we want to make sure that we have a chance to see the proposals and for people to ask questions.
No problem. And so jumping to kind of what Leila is referencing of how this plan would work this is Elliott Chelsea houses, which is located between 25th Street and 27th Street, between 9th Avenue and 10th Avenue. And the phasing would be that we would first relocate the residents that live in Chelsea Addition here on the left-hand side, where you see, yep, there we go. And as Simon mentioned, those residents would be relocated to renovated units on campus or to rentals in the Chelsea neighborhood if we're unable to accommodate them on campus. Once that relocation is complete, we would then be able to begin the abatement of Chelsea Addition and Elliott Center to remove the asbestos, and we would do that safely with an asbestos contractor, and then bring down the building, and in its place build the first new building, which is the yellow building that you see here on the right, called EC Building 1. This building would be able to accommodate residents from not only Chelsea Addition, be a new home for the Hudson Guild and the Elliott Center, as well as their kindergarten operations, but also be the new home for residents from 2 other buildings, and specifically Chelsea 2 here and Elliott 1 here. Those are the yellow buildings that you see on the left-hand side. And then once the residents move into their new home, we would then begin again abatement and demolition of the remaining yellow buildings to then build the red buildings that you see on the right. And this is kind of how we envision the phasing to go. Simon, if you could move to the next slide. A similar sort of phasing would occur down at Fulton houses, which is kind of right above Chelsea Market between 16th Street and 19th Street, 9th and 10th Avenues. And this is obviously, our plan is to build the first buildings under the current zoning, which means there is no delay after we receive HUD approvals, after we receive our environmental clearance, for us to begin the abatement, demolition, and new construction. While we are building the first new building, our intent is to pursue a rezoning through the Department of City Planning, so that we can increase the allowable densities, so that we can complete the redevelopment for the new housing for NYCHA residents in 2 phases, as opposed to 3 phases, if we are not able to increase the allowable densities. Simon, if you can move to the next slide. Great. And then lastly, once this is all done and complete, we would be left with additional sites that we could add new mixed income housing, that we would work with the city to define what that mix, affordability mix should be, and the affordable programs that we could introduce to these new purple buildings, including, you know, if the city believes that there is a need for supportive housing, for additional affordable senior housing, we would be able to bring that here. And, you know, I see someone taking pictures, but, you know, these are very conceptual images, and the buildings would obviously look more sculpted, and there would be a uniform look between the new NYCHA buildings and the purple buildings, so that when you are a passerby on the street and you look up, you will not be able to discern the difference between, oh, this is for NYCHA, former NYCHA residents, versus this is for new affordable tenants and a market rate tenants. That is that sort of kind of equitable look and feel of the campus is something that we and NYCHA care a lot about, and we want to make sure that we are able to bring that here. But this is an opportunity for the Chelsea neighborhood to see as much as 3,500 units of new housing here to really address the city's housing crisis. So Simon, if you could go to the last slide, last 2 slides, great. As we kind of go forward, our focus in the next year is to continue to do the sort of resident and community engagement that we are doing now, working with the city and HUD to attain all of our approvals, including our land use approvals, while then heading into 2025, beginning the abatement, demolition, and eventual new construction of the first buildings. And Simon, the next slide, you know, we've talked a lot about the current living conditions for a number of the residents that live here today. And that is why, and this is something that I think not every developer would promise to do, but something that we care a lot about, which is there is a minimal quality of living standards that we want to make sure residents will have, because it's not going to be overnight that new buildings are built. And this is what we are called the Meanwhile Plan, that Related in essence are investing in significant amounts of dollars in. That comprises of actually enhancing the security measures on site. We have executed a contract with Alliance, which is a security guard company, so that we would have 24/7 foot patrol on both campuses, that would be able to kind of coordinate with PS4 as well as the PD. On top of that, we would be repairing entry doors that are broken, so that the homeless aren't getting in and sleeping in the corridors, as well as making sure that the intercoms are working. So if you are someone with someone who is a little bit more homebound and aren't able to get to the door right away, you're able to let someone in through the intercom system. Additional kind of Meanwhile Plan items that we'll be investing in is pest control. That is a significant problem that we have heard from residents what the extermination company that we have contracted with will do is they will go into the units and they will be able to perform exterminations in the units, as well as set up more bait stations around the campus so that there is regular bi-monthly, bi-weekly pest treatment outside, inside the apartments, as well as in the trash chutes and the compactor rooms. And lastly, we will be addressing major building systems, including boiler repairs, inspecting the steam system down at Fulton for non-operational steam traps, and going into apartments and fixing issues such as residents that do not have permanent sinks, that have those slop sinks that you may be familiar with that are plastic, or have plastic tarp on their walls because the plaster from NYCHA has never made it to fix that. And so all of this, we will be investing dollars in during the entire time frame that the new buildings are built, until every single resident with the right to return has been housed in new buildings. With that, that concludes kind of our portion of the presentation. And Simon, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Simon. Do you want-
Thank you, Mona. Yeah, no, I don't have anything else to share. I'm happy to continue on with the program. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to ask you to stop sharing your screen, although I may ask you to share it again if there are any specific questions where we want to see the slides again. So let's jump right in. I know that there are lots of questions. I just want to give the speakers an opportunity to introduce themselves. So as I said in my introduction, we are also joined by Miguel Acevedo. Miguel, I don't see you. Oh, yes, I do see you in my little vignettes. Do you want to introduce yourself and say a few words?
Yes, I'm Miguel Acevedo, TA President at Robert Fulton Houses. And the main reason why I'm supporting the plan, so is my board and many other tenants, as you heard it directly from Simon and Mona, the ability for us to get decent housing instead of living in the conditions we are living in. And we need this as soon as we possible, so that especially my seniors don't have to call me every single night saying that they have no heat and they have no way of getting on the elevators, and they're even afraid to come out because the homeless people have taken over their buildings.
Thank you, Miguel. And we are also joined by Michael Noble, who is a tenant. Michael, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Leila. Yes, I'm a tenant. I'm also a member of the original working group and the current tenant review committees that have been part of this latest round of developments here. I'm on community board 4 members as well. I can tell you that it's been 4 years now, and when we started this, it seems like yesterday, but it's a long time ago. We put a lot of work into this thing, and it's mainly come to the point where everyone realizes that the place we live in now simply cannot be rehabilitated. It would be senseless to put any more money into these buildings, because even if you got them to look like they were the day they were first constructed 70 so years ago, they still wouldn't be up to par. Now there is no sense even trying. If we truly deserve someplace nice to live, I am taking Related in essence at their word in their promise to provide such a place. The example buildings we looked at are great. The amenities there, the finishes there, everything about them is super. You have your own heat and air conditioning in every room, which is, incredible.
And Michael, can you actually clarify which campus do you live in?
Well, I'm at Elliott Chelsea. Elliott houses.
Okay, great.
Elliott.
Thank you so much. So
Okay.
there are lots of questions. I'm going to ask everyone to stay, to remain muted unless you're speaking, so that we have a good quality of sound for everybody. So please mute yourselves if you are not speaking. And I'm going to do the first round of questions to Nicha. Just get us a little bit more facts and data. I think that's going to be very helpful. Can you actually tell us where we are in the approval process with HUD? I think everybody is fairly familiar with ULURP. So I think that, you know, we understand more or less where the approval process is with the upzoning that you're seeking eventually. But speak a little bit about the approval process with HUD.
Sure, and if it's helpful, I can pull up that timeline again. But generally speaking, for any transaction that involves converting our developments to project-based Section 8, HUD has to approve all of the plans that are going to be going into that project. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, they want to see the financial plan and the budget. They want to see all the detailed plans for the renovations, or in this case, the new buildings. They want to see that we're addressing all of their program requirements in terms of protecting resident rights. So that is a package that we will be putting together over the course of this next year. The other really important element of this, and in a normal Pact project where we're rehabilitating the existing buildings, it's not as big of a lift. In this case, because we are proposing to completely reconstruct the property, it's going to be a little more significant. And what I'm referring to is the environmental analysis. We are required by the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, to conduct a thorough environmental assessment of these actions. And to do that, we have to prepare what's known as an environmental impact statement. There's a very specific process that HUD requires us to go through to satisfy the NEPA requirements. There are many different touch points along the way for residents to weigh in on how we're analyzing those assessments, how we're mitigating the potential environmental impacts of these decisions and these changes before that environmental review is completed. We are looking to actually launch that environmental review process in the coming days. And we would be hosting the first of several series of hearings, hopefully in January. So there'll be more information posted about that process in the near term. But that would take us to about this time next year,
Okay. And
when we'd be able to submit a complete package to HUD.
If I can just quickly interrupt, Simon. So the NEPA is about to launch, or the EIS is about to launch. Is it the NEPA or the
one and the same? One and the same. The EIS, the environmental impact statement, satisfies the NEPA requirements.
And so, but have you done the EIS already?
No, that's about to launch in the coming days.
Got it. So, and do you guys do scoping for that?
Yes, the first step of the process will be scoping.
Okay, where do we find, because usually there's a scoping hearing and, you know, there are a number of mandatory hearings. Where do we find this information? Because once again, you know, we're familiar with ULURP and we know where to look. Where do we look for this information?
Well, it'll be published in the Federal Register and in local media. I'm also happy to share the information with you directly so you can distribute it to your members once the information is public.
Fantastic. I think this is going to be very useful and very important because, you know, as you can see, we have, I can't even read because I don't have my glasses, but like, I think 70 people on this call, and this is just a fraction of those who are interested in this issue. Is there a website where these hearings are posted?
Yes, that would all be included in the notice, again, which I could easily share with you once it's released. It would be hosted on the NYCHA website and all the information would be there.
Fantastic. So that means that at this particular juncture, the transaction between NYCHA or HUD and Essence and Related has not yet even been started. Is that correct?
There has been no transaction at this time, right? We need to obtain the HUD approval. The environmental review is one of the biggest pieces that go into that HUD approval. Once that's complete, we can then enter into an agreement with the development team to close on the first phase of this project, which would be those as-of-right buildings that Mona shared at one on each campus. That would kick off the redevelopment.
Got it.
That can proceed, just to clarify, without a ULURP process having concluded, because those buildings would be allowable under current zoning. While those buildings are being constructed, we would then go through a ULURP process to rezone or upzone the remaining campuses.
But that means that you would have to amend your HUD approval.
So the HUD approval would be for that project. If we're not granted the zoning changes, then we could be required to amend our proposal for HUD. Correct.
Got it. Okay. Okay. My other question, and I know that lots of people have their hands up. I'm going to get to you. I just want to get the numbers clear, because in 2017, the physical needs assessment reads that for all 4 campuses, because it's Fulton, Elliott, Chelsea, and Chelsea Addition, $490 million. But then in 2019, the working group assesses the needs at 366 million. Where does this discrepancy come from, and how do we jump from a 2017 almost 500 million needs assessment to a 2023 needs assessment that reads 925 million, where the assessment by the developer reaches over 1 billion? How do we make sense of these numbers?
Sure. So I can try and clarify. The way that NYCHA assesses the physical needs of its properties is kind of consistent with how property owners across the country do so. So we look at what are the needs in the near term, as well as what are the needs over the long term. So when the working group was thinking about the cost of stabilizing the property, it was primarily looking at those near-term needs. That $366 million figure was the 1 to 5 year need. So what are the components of the property that are going to be approaching the end of their useful life over the next 5 years? That's the $366 million. The $490 million number that you quoted is the 20-year need. So that looked at the longer term need of the properties, things that would be approaching the end of their life cycle within 5 to 20 years. And that just kind of goes to show, to Miguel's point, that just addressing those 1 to 5 year needs and budgeting for those needs would not necessarily address all of the different requirements that the community has in terms of the long-term stabilization of the property.
And how do you get from basically there is an 85% increase from 2017 to 2023 in the assessment,
Right.
The needs assessment done with the same metrics. How do you, and this is actually consistent over a number of NYCHA campuses throughout the city.
Yep, so that's consistent with what we've seen in terms of cost increases for our properties all across the city. It's due to a number of factors. NYCHA's in a crisis moment. We have been putting Band-Aids on our buildings for many years. And the fact that we haven't been able to make really substantial investments in our properties in decades has led to the snowball effect. We are seeing, if you look at the chart of how NYCHA's physical needs have increased over, the past 20 years, it's really been exponential in the last, from 2012 to 2017 to 2013, it's really unprecedented. That coupled with the increasing costs of labor and materials have led to that really sharp rise in costs that we're seeing.
Okay, there are lots of questions also in the chat that I will try to get to, but I want to start opening up to those who have their hand up. So attendees, if you have a question, please use the raise hand function if you want to ask your question live. Let's all remember the format, and please work with me and work with CRDC. Limit your question to 30 seconds, and speakers, please limit the answer to 90 seconds, and we'll try to get to all the speakers to have a chance to speak. So the first person to speak tonight is Roberta Gelb.
Leila, I just want to tell you that Tito's been raising his hand. Tito is raising his hand, his actual hand, and he had his actual hand up before I put my electronic hand up. So can we start with him, please?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Roberta, for bringing this to my attention. Tito, you are first. Go ahead. And
he's unmuting. Oh. Tito, do you want me to go while you unmute? You're still unmuted.
Tito, I unmuted you.
Okay, good. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So I have two questions real quick to NYCHA. Will all the buildings be mixed income, or will NYCHA tenants be in some buildings and market rate be in others? Wouldn't it be better if all the buildings were mixed income? That's number one. Number two is a survey. You said there was a survey, and residents thought that this would probably be the best fit. However, a survey is not a vote. So I want to know, was there a vote taken on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Tito. And I don't know if Simon, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Well, the buildings are going to be constructed in a way that the NYCHA residents that currently live at the site will have their own buildings. And then there would be separate mixed income buildings apart from the NYCHA buildings. The reason behind that was because if we were going to include some NYCHA units in the mixed income buildings, the project would take longer. Overall, this project is expected to take about 20 years to be completed to finish that last mixed income building. We're actually proposing with this approach of building the NYCHA replacement buildings first, that every NYCHA resident would be rehoused within 10 years. So that just gives you a sense of, or less than 10 years, Mona can correct me with the exact time frame, but that's the primary reason why we wanted to take this approach.
Yeah, good. Go ahead, sorry.
And so the other question was about the survey. So there's no requirement for us to do a vote. I just want to be clear about that. We are working all across the city. We put our residents first in terms of making decisions for their communities. We do not do votes at Pact Developments, but we try and take the temperature of our communities and understand through conversations with resident leaders and the communities at large what they want to see at their developments as we raise this really historic level of funding to invest in their buildings. And so, we listen to our residents, and a survey is one tool that we use to do so.
Thank you, Simon. I just have a quick follow-up on the on Tito's first part of the question. Can you tell us actually how many units currently exist? How many units will exist of NYCHA housing will exist in the new development, and how many new units you're planning to build?
So we'll be fully replacing the existing 2,056 units of NYCHA housing that are there with 2,056 NYCHA units. And then Mona, do you want to speak to the additional mixed income housing that'll be built on top of that?
Yeah, under the current zoning, we would be able to build about 1,800 additional mixed income units, which would be NYCHA compliant in terms of its affordability mix. And depending on the densities that we would receive from our ULURP application, we could build up to 3,500 new mixed income units, and again, would be NYCHA compliant.
So in essence, there would be more market rate and mixed income than public housing in your scenario, like in your preferred scenario. I'll take this as a
That's inclusive of the permanently affordable units. We can do the math and get back to you.
Okay, and do you already have the level of affordability? What is the
So
AMI?
MIA, that hasn't been determined yet. It'll really depend on, so the way that mandatory inclusionary housing works is the city council actually decides. So if the city council were to grant the land use changes, they would impose on the development partner the MIH option that spells out this precise affordability level. And so that can range between 20 to 30% permanent affordability at different low income brackets.
But it can go all the way to 200%.
No. So MIH in this part of the city would be capped at, I think it's 120% of area median income, and that would only be allowable for a very small portion of the permanently affordable units. They would have to average at 80% of area median income at the highest level.
Okay, that's
Leila, may I just add a little bit to the question that Tito had?
Of course, Miguel.
So Tito mentioned about why isn't the opportunity given for all the buildings to have the NYCHA residents. Unfortunately, the only way we as residents in public housing will get our tenant rights is through the replacement buildings that carry over to the public housing buildings.
Okay, thank you, Miguel. The next question goes to Roberta.
So I saw a rather disturbing documentary last week called Raising Liberty Square, in which Related had a very similar project in Miami. And there were many things that were disturbing about it, but one of the things was that a very small percentage of the tenants actually got relocated into the new housing. And also the quality of the buildings were questionable, because by the time the documentary was made, they took a tour and they saw a lot of the things that we saw today that you're describing as problems, we saw in the documentary. So I'm wondering, I don't know if you've seen that documentary, but I'm wondering how we avoid those issues in this project.
Well, I can speak to that.
I would suggest everybody watch that documentary. I think you can probably find it. It's called Raising Liberty Square. Sorry to interrupt, Simon.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for asking the question. So wherever we're doing the Pact program in New York City, whether it's rehabilitation or new construction, we hear stories from across the country about how other municipalities have implemented the RAD program. Remember, RAD underpins our implementation of Pact. And the really important thing to take away is that cities across the country implement it in completely different ways. I don't know exactly how they organize the financing for Liberty Square project, or what kind of promises were made, or what role the housing authority there played. But we implement the Pact program in a very specific way. We've been doing it consistently since 2016. We've been making a number of different enhancements. We've so far have about 20,000 apartments under construction or complete, and take our residents out to see the work for themselves and the quality of homes that our residents are living in and benefiting from in the Pact model. So what I mentioned earlier in terms of how NYCHA retains ownership of the land, we exercise oversight responsibilities of our partners and hold them accountable. Not every city across the country has done that. So I can't speak to what the city of Miami has done, but we implement this program in a very specific way, and also in a way that really does put residents at the front and the center. They make all of the decisions around what the units need to look like, the finishes, the kinds of priorities in terms of investments, security management, all those things. So again, I can't speak to that model. I just know the way that we do it here.
So, Simon, a follow-up question on that. Who is, so you said NYCHA will retain ownership of the land. What about the buildings?
Well, in this case, because brand new buildings would be constructed, no, we would have a ground lease on the land, on the underlying land.
Okay. And what happens if, you know, God forbid, related defaults on their loan? Who repossesses buildings, and what kind of protection? Because, you know, bad things happen. God forbid.
Sure. Well, so there's a whole range of different agreements that we have to enter into with HUD, with the financing partners, with Essence and Related, and that would spell out what would happen in the case of a default or any other on loan payments and debt service or any other kind of responsibility that they may have. And there would be different forms of recourse, but ultimately we would have the ability to step in and correct.
Can I clarify one thing? I just want to say one
Very
thing.
briefly, Roberta, go ahead.
Very quickly. The developer was the same. Yes, it was a different location, and Miami was probably very different than New York, and probably different oversight, but the developer was the same. It was related companies.
But may I correct her, Leila? Roberta, if you go into the Wall Street Journal, you'll see the true story behind what happened in Miami. From our understanding, it was a different developer that used the name Related. It wasn't the Related that's in New York. It's a whole different Related. They even used their logo to make it look like it was that. But if you read the story that was written in the Wall Street Journal, which I can get you a copy of it and anybody wants, it tells you the true story, what really happened in Miami.
Okay, so it looks like it's the tale of two related. Okay, thank you, Miguel. The next question goes to Francine. Francine, go ahead.
Is Bert the next one?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay. Okay,
You want me?
I'm here. Okay,
Bert, go ahead. Fran, you will be next. It was my mistake. Sorry. Go ahead, Bert.
we're past that. Okay. It's actually two questions, part of one question. Two words keep being thrown out generally: density, density, density. Do we have the numbers, and however we want, what metric we want to use, dense population or housing units currently, and in the two different, one with the current zoning and one with the rezoning? And then part of that same question is, we also talked about in your presentation, the assumption is the market rate housing will help pay for all the improvements. Okay, so how many units of the market rate will pay for the improvements? I'm not contesting, you know, the actual number of it's going to cost this or that, because we're only projecting. Okay, but do you have any kind of way to determine X amount of units will pay for that, and the units that you're proposing are that number? Are they more than that number? That's my question. Two aspects of actually the same question.
Thank you for that. So the first question regarding density, this will become more clear once we release the draft scope of work in the coming days, but we're measuring density by gross square footage of all uses under the current and proposed rezoning. That includes community facility, retail, and residential space. And so there'll be detailed tables in the draft scope of work that's released as part of to kick off the environmental review process in the coming days. And that will include exactly what level of density we're talking about. And then
Can you give us, we know FAR, we speak FAR, and maybe Mona is able to plug this number. Is there an FAR that you're proposing already?
To be clear, we have not begun the ULURP process, but to get to the up to 3,500 units, the FAR achievable would be 12 on the avenues and 10 on the mid blocks.
Okay, thank you. And for folks, FAR stands for floor area ratio, which is a metric to actually measure built density, like how dense a building is, not only the height, but the density. Thank you, Mona.
Yeah, but I just want to say something. I come from an old-fashioned urban planning background. And for me, density is how many people are living. And, you know, of course, it's an estimate of how many you're going to have in each unit. But how many people are living in the number of acres we have now and the number of people you're proposing to live in the same amount of acres? The acreage is not changing. It's the number of people. That's what I'm really thinking about in terms of density. But I'm also very interested in the other question. How many units of market rate do we need to pay for the improvements?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Bert. All of those details, because square footage yields number of units, yields a number of people. All those assumptions are going to be part of the environmental review process. We have to look at all those things, so it will all be spelled out there. Right now, you know, our assumption is that the level of density that's proposed is what's required to facilitate the creation of the NYCHA replacement buildings at the level that we saw in those example projects from Hunters Point South and Roosevelt Island. But you know, we understand that as we enter the ULURP process, there's going to be a lot of feedback that we hear from the community. We also need to enter into a more formal design review process with our residents at these sites and really hear from them about, you know, the shape and the height and the bulk of the building, the orientation. That's going to influence, you know, exactly the level of density, the number of market rate units that can be built. I wouldn't look at it as what is the number of market rate units that need to be built to facilitate the NYCHA replacement, but the more we degrade or reduce the number of market rate units, there will be a point at which we can't finance the replacement buildings, but it'll also result in a weaker product, right? So we want to raise as much money as we can to create the highest quality replacement buildings. Any money that we raise through the market rate buildings is going to be reinvested on site in the NYCHA housing. So that's kind of how we're looking at it. I hope that helps.
I have a follow-up on that. Simon, when you say money that we raise, who's raising the money? Is it NYCHA? Is it the developer? And are they going to mortgage anything as part of the redevelopment? Are they going to mortgage the land?
So the way that you're able to raise financing is by mortgaging the property against the income stream that's produced. So in the case of Pact, that's the Section 8 contracts from the federal government. And yeah, the developer is going to be investing on an amount equivalent to the value of the market rate housing in the upfront in the creation of the replacement buildings. That's how those buildings are going to get constructed.
So they're not mortgaging the land?
No.
Okay. Fran, you have the next question.
My great concern is that there's going to be a lot of money being passed around, both private money and public money. And I wonder who is going to oversee all of that money? What kinds of plans are we making to have a actual accounting of these things?
That's a good question. Oh.
It's a very good question.
Sure. Was there a second part to that, or should I
Well,
respond?
the second part is, what happens when people make promises that they can't keep? Who's going to pay for that? It's a wonderful idea that you can pay for things because you're going to get market rates, but suppose you can't. You're claiming that the market rate, the money from the market rate is going to be invested. Who is going to oversee all of these things? Very complicated issue.
Yeah.
And no, and I don't hear personally, I don't hear one thing that has to do with watching the store. And to me, this is an essential part of seeing that any program is done to its best. So
Yeah,
Sure.
any or Mona, any thoughts on that?
I can speak to that, and Mona can certainly chime in. There's going to be lots of different actors watching the money, watching the performance of NYCHA and our partners, Essence and Related, in fulfilling the obligations. As I mentioned, there's going to be a whole host of legal agreements between NYCHA and the partner, NYCHA and HUD, HUD and the partner, lenders and NYCHA, lenders and the partner. And these are really going to codify everybody's responsibilities from a financial perspective, and also in terms of actually creating the product that we expect. And this is a very tightly controlled and highly regulated program. Again, this is something that HUD has been implementing for more than 10 years. It's something that NYCHA has been doing since 2016. We have a team here at NYCHA whose only job is to oversee the performance of our partners and make sure that they're fulfilling the obligations. And also because of the nature of project-based Section 8. So developers have a very strong incentive to perform based in the financing. They are accountable to not just government, but also to investors, lenders, and lots of people are going to be minding the store to make sure that things go as planned.
Simon, I have a follow-up on that, if that's okay. Just, looking at the history, the fairly short history of this project, we started from 388 million, and now we are over 1 billion. And we are actually asked to agree that, this is the new number. And we have not even started. Secondly, and, please don't take it personally, but NYCHA has demonstrated in the past decades their inability to maintain the buildings. So how are we supposed to put trust for a project that is so incredibly disruptive and devastating, even if you agree with, the end result being a net plus, which there's no consensus on that? How can we have trust and faith that this is where we're going to get, and that, to Fran's question, the money is going to be well managed? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm on mute. No, I mean, I absolutely understand the cynicism and the mistrust. I do want to clarify, the numbers that have been presented don't represent the plan. We're still in the very, very early stages of shaping this proposed project. We're going to be spending the next, again, 20 years, really, building this out in phases. Each phase is going to have a budget, a scope, a plan that has to get reviewed by all those different parties and stakeholders that I mentioned every step along the way. So it's not like we just go and we say this is what it's going to be, and that's the playbook that we follow. There's going to be continual oversight and implementation of this. And then just to respond to the other point, I mean, that's why we need public-private partnerships, right? Because NYCHA, in many regards, has been unable to maintain the quality of housing that we need. The only place we can turn to through HUD in the RAD program is private partners. and their abilities and their ability to raise funding. So that's how this all works and comes together. It may not be a model that everybody necessarily believes in, but it is a proven model. It's been working here. And it's really the only option to make this kind of substantial investment.
Leila, if I
Prince-
may,
Sorry, I'm
can I
on mute.
just say one other thing? Leila,
Go ahead,
I know
Miguel.
that it ballooned the project in numbers, but let's also take in consideration that the federal government has refused to give any money to public housing, especially in NYCHA. Then the other thing is NYCHA's capital improvement in the last 2 years has gone from $40 billion to $80 billion. And that's in less than 2 years.
Yeah, no, thank you, Miguel, for this point, which, you know, I mean, this ballooning is actually concerning, you know, in and of itself. But Simon, at the very beginning of the conception of this project, I think that, you know, both communities, both campuses did express the support and the desire for going co-op. And this is actually a proven model. There is, you know, a very, very successful case in New Orleans. And, you know, this particular community that is very stable, that is very, you know, well-established, and, you know, those residents have lived in these apartments for a very, very long time. They support going co-op, and you know, if they are able to mortgage the land, or you know, mortgage the you know, the buildings, this would be fundable. So, you know, I don't know that when you say, you know, that the public-private partnership is the only way. You know, I think that there may be other options. It may be less desirable options. It may be options that, you know, don't fit with the RAD Pact. But, you know, I just want to, you know, mention it, that, you know, at the very beginning, at the inception, you know, going co-op was, you know, something that was, you know, certainly that had the support of this community. Moving on, the next question goes to Marnie. Marnie.
Oh, yes. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So the first thing I wanted to say is that NYCHA tenants were not allowed into the last resident engagement meeting at the Fulton Senior Center. And I confronted you, Simon, about this, and you basically walked away from me. Plus, Jamar Alexander ignored the screams of tenants. They were screaming, why weren't we let into the meeting? So, you know, I put that up on my Twitter for everybody to see. I don't think that's very nice. So I would like to see Simon and the rest of NYCHA apologize to all the tenants that wanted to go to the meeting. So that's number one. Number two, there are some real truths here, and I'm speaking the truth. HUD has repeatedly stated that they do not have the bandwidth to monitor developers once a NYCHA development converts to Section 8. The Government Accounting Office has a report that states that HUD does not have the ability to even enforce tenant protections. The report also had serious questions about the long-term preservation of affordable units when converted to RAD, and also inflated reports of private funding leveraged through RAD. Number three, the National Housing Law Project asserted that developers during privatization often ignore the tenant rights that are stipulated in their own leases, like the right to return or only paying 30% of income to rent. And under the Baez case, overseen by Judge William Pauley, Section 9.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up.
Okay, so just my question is, my basic question is, how are NYCHA tenants ever going to trust any developer if they're going to demolish and privatize when there's all this evidence out there that points that there's going to be displacement? Full stop.
Thank you. So the two questions, Simon, are access to meetings and you know, the level of trust based on you know, historical precedent.
Leila, I'm going to answer the first question. As
Okay,
per
go ahead.
my
Yeah,
request,
Miguel, you were there.
I was there. I
will not allow cross conversation. So Miguel, go ahead.
I am answering her question. At my request, this meeting was only for Fulton residents, because at the last Elliott meeting that they had, all they did was disrupt the speakers, and the tenants from Elliott Chelsea were not able to hear the proposal that was at hand. At Fulton houses, there was zero disruptions by any resident from Fulton houses to make the meeting disruptive and no one get to hear what the concerns and what the new proposal is. That's why we closed it off and left it for Fulton houses residents only.
Okay, were all the residents of Fulton allowed to attend the meeting?
Every single resident of Fulton houses. Only ones that weren't allowed was people that were from Elliott who were disrupted, and people that have no saying and do not live in public housing.
Okay.
I'd like to respond if I may.
I will give you the opportunity to respond, but I also want to hear the response to you, the second part of your question. Given their historical precedent, how do we look at the future with NYCHA being the manager or the oversight, whether NYCHA or HUD being the oversight authority on a development that is managed by a private company?
Well, so my response there is the same as I gave to Miguel regarding the project in Miami. That report that you referenced is a survey of public housing authorities' implementation of RAD all across the country. I don't believe they reference NYCHA's work on the Pact program. If you look at the data in terms of how Pact properties do compared to NYCHA, we close work orders in several days compared to several months. We don't have any elevator or heat outages. We don't have any more evictions than are currently exist in the public housing portfolio. So those kinds of concerns, to me, again, just speak to the differences in how the program's implemented across the country. But we feel very confident in our ability to implement the program here in New York City.
And have you actually implemented any of those RAD Pact programs in New York yet, Simon?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, we have already transitioned over 20,000 apartments to project-based Section 8 through the Pact program. They're all at different stages of construction. I believe we have over 6,000 units that are completed at this stage. So it's been a model that's been working for quite a few years now.
Okay, thank you. But they're still underway. None of them are completed.
We have over 6,000 units that have been completed.
Okay, thank you. The next question goes to Michael Noble. Michael, go ahead.
Leila, other people have raised their hands. I'm going to ask to be put at the end of the line here. Can you do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Michael.
All right.
The next question goes to Matthew Robinson.
Hi, everyone. A couple things. One, you talk about the buildings, but what about schools and other infrastructure in the neighborhood? Would that be overburdened by the new population? So will there be renovations of some of the schools or additional schools? In addition to that, the subways, will the subways on 8th Avenue get some sort of kick of money to renovate the subways to accommodate the new amount of people? The other thing is, presently, there's a Western Beef. Is that the store that will be going into the supermarket, or will it be just a competitive free-for-all? And the other thing too is, with someone who's has a 3-bedroom or whatever, but then the kids go away and now there's just one person, is there upsizing and downsizing in the program that allows you to not have a single person in a 3-bedroom? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Great questions. So the question about school capacity, transportation, and other civic resources and amenities, those are all going to be analyzed as part of the environmental review process. They will be well documented in the EIS that, again, would be made public and residents and members of the community would have the opportunity to submit comments and feedback on how we would or should address those issues if there are any impacts that are identified. In terms of the supermarket tenant that is currently envisioned for the new property, I'll let Mona speak to that. I don't believe there are any current agreements with operators or an assumption that it would be the Western Beef provider. That operator is actually not located on the NYCHA campus. It's just an adjacent property. Mona, maybe you want to elaborate on tenants?
Yeah, and our thought.
Very briefly, because we have lots of questions that we really want to get to. Thank you, Mona.
Our thought on the healthy grocer is that it would be a fresh grocer, affordable grocer. We are looking at different providers, but that has not been determined at this time. It would not be the Western Beef that currently exists there today.
Okay, thank you.
I'm so sorry. Can you remind me the last question?
I think the other question was on subway utilization, which I think falls.
No, it's on upsizing and downsizing.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yes,
So
sorry.
really quickly, everybody would move into a new appropriately sized unit, given their household size. If you are one person living in a 3-bedroom, you're not going to be provided a 3-bedroom in the new replacement buildings. You'll be provided a 1-bedroom.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to let him know that that's automatic in NYCHA development throughout the whole city. That's a requirement. We have to understand if our families shrink, we have to get right size into the right size apartment.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. The next question goes to John Mudd.
Hi there. John Mudd here from Midtown South Community Council. Essentially, you've said a lot in the beginning, and it's a lot to unpack, and I'd love to have you in a meeting and discuss a lot more of this. I'd like to get your commitment to come to one of our meetings, but so I'll keep it short. I'll keep it specific. Essentially, we're acting like the worst landlords here in the city. That's what NYCHA has been doing. I mean, 2015, 2018, there was some surveys done. They assessed what needed to be worked out, what the place needed, and it wasn't done. And from the very beginning, they have been wanting to get, to destroy NYCHA properties. I mean, this and 30% is.
John, just for the sake of the flow of the meeting, get to your question. We have lots of people who have their hands up, and I really want to get to everybody.
Sure. My question is when it comes to your development, there's a lot of history there, a lot of history elsewhere we can look to. NYCHA hasn't been that responsibility. The profit companies are out for profit. So you've talked about the oversight, but what are the guarantees? I mean, you talked about the HUD and everything, and you heard from Marnie about they're not going to be responsible. So you've got two.
Okay, I think we got your question, John. Simon, what are the guarantees?
Well, I feel like I've responded to this version of this question a few times already. Nothing in life is guaranteed. We are going to be exercising our oversight of the project. It's going to be subject to an array of different legal documents and agreements between all of the different parties involved in regulating the program, lending to the program, the landowner, NYCHA, and we've been able to effectively do that at other Pact projects, and we're going to continue to do that here.
Okay, thank you, Simon. The next question goes to Jackie.
Hi, question number one. In the conclusion of the working group, there was no demolition to be done to none of these developments. Who proposed the demolition again? And why can't you start downsizing people now? Because there's a lot of people that live in 3-4 bedroom and it's only one single person. So why you can't start that arranging now? Why we have to wait for the developer? What can
Thank
I
you.
say?
Well, so the requirement to downsize, to place households in appropriately sized apartments is a federal requirement. NYCHA just doesn't implement it. There have been a whole range of different reasons why it's been challenging for NYCHA to do so. I'm not an expert on the situation, but when we do transition to project-based Section 8, there is more flexibility, and our partners, as the new property management, have been able to more effectively do that over time as units become available. In terms of the change from what the working group report said and to where we are now, again, this was not a change that we made overnight. There were dozens of resident meetings earlier this year, consultations with elected officials, people who participated in the working group from the year prior, to really lay out the current situation that we're in, where we're finding that the rehabilitation needs have really just grown exponentially. So those kinds of realizations really led to this new conversation that we've been having over the course of the early half of this year.
And residents were involved in that? I'm sorry, Leila.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Jackie.
Residents were involved in this decision that you guys made, because I don't remember being in that decision.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, there were dozens of meetings and tours that we hosted together with Essence and Related. Approximately 30% of households across the communities participated in the survey and selected the rebuilding option. So there were a whole different range of ways that people could complete the survey. Everybody got flyers for the meetings at their doors.
No, I know about the flyers. I know about the meetings. It just keeps changing. 62%, Jamal said at the Pact meeting. You're saying 20% of the tenants.
I said 30.
You guys got it. 30%.
Wait.
Miguel said 20%. So the survey keeps changing. But thank you for answering.
Sure.
Also, I think it would be helpful, Simon. How many people were on the working group, and how many tenants?
I don't have that information on hand right now, but it was a fluid group. There was a core body of people who stuck with it through the end. It happened during the pandemic. Well, it started before the pandemic in person and then shifted to being virtual during the pandemic. So there were changes in terms of who participated all the way through, but there was a really substantial body of residents who were front and center in the working group process. I don't know if Miguel, you have a ballpark estimate of who.
So basically, Leila, at least 30 to 35% of the working group consisted of residents. And there was a number of not-for-profits, and every single elected official that represents our community was part of it.
But Miguel, in terms of numbers, how many people was that? Was that 20 or was that 200?
25 of the residents were part of the working group. At least 20, 25. Even people like Jackie Laura, who opposed the project from the beginning, was part of the working group.
And I still oppose it.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, so 20 to 25. Okay, that's helpful. The next question goes to Bill Borok. Bill, you're on mute. Okay, I'll come back to you, Bill. The next question goes to Luana.
Hey, Leila, thank you so much. Thank you, CRDC, for holding this important meeting. I don't have a question. I just have a comment.
Go ahead.
My comment is this. It doesn't matter who the developer is. We know that the area is being gentrified and that Hudson Yards is expanding its reach throughout the lower Manhattan area. The problem I see with this plan is discrimination, racism, and gentrification. That's the plan that I see that's happening. It's bigger than development. It's bigger than the buildings. It's bigger than the money. It's about moving minorities out of an area that is uprising, that is now becoming an elite area to live in. And I find it appalling that the speaker for Essence, she was insulting, talking about the aesthetic of New York City housing and the surrounding areas. I grew up in New York City housing. I lived in New York City housing for over 40 years. If I had the opportunity to buy a co-op, buy my apartment in New York City housing, I would have stayed there. I had the opportunity to buy a co-op, and that's what I did. But I loved it so much that I would have stayed there. When we talk about homelessness, when we talk about crime, we're talking about our whole neighborhood. We're talking about the whole world right now. So those are not the issues. The issues I see are deeper and more intrinsic. When we're talking about minority communities that make mostly less than $50,000, yet we have a median income, an average income in Chelsea of over $190,000. We're talking about racism. We're talking about discrimination. We're talking about people being displaced. Miguel, even in his own meeting, said that some people will not be returning to their apartments, that the rezoning of the area will change the demographics of the area, that the people that live there now many will not be returning to their apartments. We're talking about the elderly, we're talking about children's school, we're talking about children's work, we're talking about a whole community. So when we think of what we're doing here in this situation, it's bigger than about money, and it's bigger than about redevelopment. It's about the change in the demographic scope of this area. We have minority businesses and firms that have left the area because the people can no longer afford to have their businesses here. Yet we have these other businesses that don't cater to the minority or low income community. So where are they supposed to go? So I have a problem with Essence. I have a problem with this host plan. And I think that if there is a plan to keep people in their homes and not try to appeal to the base needs of a new stove, a new refrigerator, and a new floor, which makes no sense to me, you can tell that that is a high priority for people with low income because they're not thinking of the big picture. So I really feel affronted. I really feel abused by the conversation that's happening here. There is a plan, there is money. If people don't want to give money because there's a bigger plan. So I just wanted to make that comment, and thank you for allowing me to do so. Oh, I'll be showing Raising Liberty here at Penn South. So if anybody wants to come on next Thursday at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Let us know.
Leila, may I respond? First of all,
I'll send you the link, Leila.
Thank you. I really, I allowed Luana to make a.
It's just 2 seconds.
Hold on, Miguel.
I just commented. I didn't.
Hold on.
But
Luana,
you
thank you so much. Miguel, I will let you speak. I allowed Luana to make a comment when clearly I had said that I would not allow comments. Luana is the past president of CRDC. She is a
sorry, I came on late, so I didn't hear that.
Former tenant of public housing, which is why I allowed it. Just to be clear, and I'm asking other speakers to follow the rule that I had spelled out at the onset. Miguel, go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, at no time did I ever say that people will not return. Okay, one of the first things that I am advocating for is the right to return and to make sure that is guaranteed. And then you can go on the Community Board 4 website, on the NYCHA website, it shows every single tenant protection that we will be given through this redevelopment.
I have you on video saying it, Miguel.
I will not allow any cross conversation.
That's her though.
Ask you to follow this.
But Leila, this is the reason why people like her and Marty,
we're not going to do. Don't refer to any people, Miguel.
No, but what I'm saying is they want to be disruptive. But they want to. I'm speaking. I let her speak. Why should I have be entitled to speak, right? They want to be disrupted at meetings. They want to be disrupted at these forums. First of all, if she was so concerned about racism, how is it racism if we are given the opportunity in the near future to have a decent place to live? The way we are living now is decrepitable, and we shouldn't, because we are minorities, have to live that way because it is NYCHA. we will be living in beautiful conditions. That's not racism. That's better for us to live at.
Okay, thank you, Miguel. And really, you know, I really, once again, I allowed Luana to make this comment. She's a past president of CRDC, and she is a former tenant of public housing.
Leila, I just want to kind of respond quickly to Luana.
Yes.
Luana, first of all, I apologize if I've made you feel insulted. I do not believe I've kind of spoke to the aesthetics of the current public housing. Our focus has been on the health and safety and longevity of these meetings. And so I extend a personal apology to you for how you are feeling as a result of you know, my comments, which certainly did not intend to speak to the aesthetics of the housing. What I did speak to aesthetics wise is that the new buildings would be built such that you would not be able to tell if this is market rate or this is affordable housing. I personally, kind of when my parents moved to the US, we lived in affordable housing. So I understand the importance of equity and the having kind of the same look and feel about these buildings. So just wanted to say that to you, Luana.
Thank you.
Leila, Bill Borak is unmuted and he was next.
Okay, Bill, you're next.
3 quick questions. Earlier, it was said that there would be up to 30% housing. Up to is not the same as definite. So my question is it going to be definite 30% or up to, which could be a different number?
So that'll be subject to negotiations at the city council. When they approve, if they approve the Euler application to rezone the site, they will decide, the city council, what mandatory inclusionary housing option we must comply with.
So I guess the second question is, affordable is, and it was raised before, the different kind of affordable housing. There's affordable for middle-class people, and there's affordable for low-income people. So when you say affordable, affordable for who?
So HPD, the city's housing agency, has a table that publishes the income limits for residents who reside in inclusionary housing units. I can share that with Leila after the meeting. But mandatory inclusionary housing allows for a whole range from 40% of the area median income or below up to 120% of area median income at this location. And again, the exact mix would skew towards the lower end based on the existing rule, but the final determination of what those income levels would be decided by the city council.
Right. And Simon, you also, I'm sorry, Simon, you also said that the blended average would be 80%, correct?
It depends on the option. So there are options that require the average to be 40%, 60%, or 80% of area median income.
Got it. Okay.
Last quick question.
Last question, very quickly, very quickly.
When you say affordable housing, will it be permanent? Because I didn't hear the word permanent included.
Yes, the NYCHA replacement units will be permanent as required by our ground lease and the restrictive declaration against the land. And the mandatory inclusionary housing program also requires permanence of affordability.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question goes to Hector Vasquez. Hector, go ahead. Hector, you're on mute.
Yes, hi, how you doing? I'm Hector Vasquez, and I'm actually pretty active in the Community Board 4, and I'm also a member of the Fulton Tenants Association and a former resident and Tenants Association member of LA Chelsea Houses. And I was also involved with the working group from the beginning, and I actually stayed through the whole process till the end, to its finale, to come up with a feasible plan to ensure the future of our homes. I'm kind of appalled at the comments being made saying that people were not involved with the process, when I myself, as a resident and a father of 2 and a disabled veteran, has been involved with this process from day one. So I find it really insulting that some people are coming out from the woodwork who don't even live here, and some residents who do, that are misleading the general public and some of the facts that they're presenting. Now, the fact is,
Hector, do you have a question?
yes, I do have a question. Okay,
go ahead with your question.
my question is that I know that we are guaranteed a return to the residents, okay? But the longevity of that guarantee, how long does it last? Because honestly, that has been raised several times, but I know the answer to that, but I want everybody else to hear that. Because honestly, some people are afraid that they're going to be excluded and basically kicked out of their homes and losing their houses, but that is not the case. So I want to hear somebody present that. Simon, would you be able to present that, please?
Sure. And just to clarify the universe of what we're talking about, only 6% of households would have to temporarily move to another apartment. Our goal is to relocate them to vacant units within their home campus. That's about 120 households.
Now, how is that guaranteed? I'm sorry, Simon, how is that guaranteed?
So the rules governing the RAD program and also any relocations that have to happen as a part of a federal redevelopment program require that we maintain a right to return and a right to remain. So if you are on the campus at the time of the rehabilitation and redevelopment, you have a right to remain. You also, if you are moved offsite temporarily, you have a right to return. It does not expire. And those are the federal regulations.
So the rumors that we're hearing about being displaced are totally hearsay and rumors. Basically, we have everything in writing that we will be guaranteed to be able to return to our homes as long as we are in good standing and we are actually leaseholders of those apartments, correct?
That's correct. And the actual legal document that enforces that requirement is the lease. So every tenant would have to sign a new lease that lays out in very specific terms what their rights are. And if you have to be temporarily moved, there'd be a temporary move agreement that supplements the lease and also further spells out those things. And everybody will have the opportunity to review that lease before they have to sign it.
Simon, just a follow-up question on that. Signing a lease can be a little daunting. What kind of legal assistance will tenants be provided? Like independent legal assistance, meaning that it's not paid by you or by the developer?
Sure. So under the Pact program, we have a partnership with the Legal Aid Society. They run a hotline where any tenant at the time of lease signing who has a question about the lease or anything related to their tenancy can call and speak to an attorney for free at the Legal Aid Society.
Okay, the Legal Aid Society that is actually highly critical of the particular project. Just want to state it for the record, and their statement is available on their website. There is a question in the chat. Someone is asking the breakdown of the results of the survey per campus. Do you or Mona or maybe Miguel have this information?
So the only thing that we were told on the breakdown through both developments, being that it's one project, 62% of the residents combined from Elliott and Fulton houses supported the redevelopment of the plan.
Okay, and I think it's worth noting, and let me know if I misunderstood it. The word demolition is not present in the language of the survey.
I'm not sure if demolition was there, but replacement buildings was in the survey.
Okay, which could be also interpreted as replacement of the units.
No, in the first part, in the end, the third one was replaced with renovating the units. The other ones was replacement. They didn't use the word, I'm not sure they did, demolition, but bringing in brand new buildings to replace the old buildings.
Okay. The next question goes to Noah Clarish.
Hi, so I've just been listening in the background. I'm a high school student and I live in the adjacent building. My name is Sienna Clarish. And I'm just wondering what considerations are being taken regarding the quality of life for the existing community during this 20-year project. Because I know that the people in the NYCHA housing at the moment are being relocated, but obviously the people in the adjacent community aren't moving. So I'm just wondering, how will my quality of life and my family's quality of life and the people around me be affected?
Thank you. So there's going to be, you know, a lot of construction when this project starts moving forward. I don't know if Mona, you want to speak to this?
Sure, I'm happy to speak to that. We acknowledge that it is going to be a long construction period. As we move forward with our EIS process, what the EIS will analyze is the impact of the construction noise, construction traffic generated as part of our logistics planning coming out of the EIS process. Mitigants that are identified to reduce the amount of noise, to dampen the effect of the added traffic added to the neighborhood would be implemented and would be enforced as a result of the restricted declaration that would come out of the EIS process that we would adhere to when we do begin construction on these sites. But we acknowledge that it is a long construction timeframe.
And Leila, may I say that when the affordable housing building on West 25th Street took place over at Elliott Chelsea Houses, the Haywood building was part of the process from the first day to the very last day to make sure that the outside community other than NYCHA was involved in the conversations.
Okay, so what I would say is that, you know, for all the folks who are in attendance and beyond, remain involved. There will be public hearings. I really urge everyone to go and testify, to submit letters if you're not able to testify in person. It is really important to make your voices heard, and you know, there will be opportunities. It is you know, if you are concerned with this plan, it is really important to remain focused and mobilized, and make your voices heard, make your concerns known, not only at the city level but also at the federal level. As we heard, you know, this project needs the approval of HUD, which is a federal agency. So it is really important to remain engaged throughout the entire process. The next question goes to Alexa. Alexa, you're next.
Yes. Hi. My name. Oh wait. Hi. Ooh.
We can hear you.
Alexa,
we can see you.
How are you? I have a question. What's the difference between affordable and subsidized? You know, when you have subsidized and when you have affordable, but I believe that the subsidized is Section 9 and affordable is for middle class people, right?
There's no real definition. It's all kind of semantics. Affordable housing generally is regulated in a whole bunch of different ways across New York City. If we're talking about project-based Section 8 and public housing, it works in the same way. The federal government provides a subsidy to the landlord, NYCHA, or the Pact partner to support the rents that help them operate the property.
I think you're wrong, because I think affordable is like a lottery apartment that you have to make a certain amount of money.
Right. So new affordable housing is today is traditionally constructed using the low-income housing tax credit and capital funding from the city. That's often just referred to as quote unquote affordable housing, but in reality, it's utilizes a whole range of different subsidy sources. Some can be operating, some can be capital. It really runs the whole gamut.
Yeah.
I would focus more on the income levels of the different program,
Yeah,
not the terminology.
the Section 8, it has maintenance fee. It has like 50 something percent that they'll combine with the 30%. They'll give us the 30%, but they're going to start charging us for the washing machine, for the for everything else, all the appliances that are there.
So this goes to what I had mentioned earlier, the way that we implement this program here in New York.
Yeah,
we don't allow the partners.
Alexa, let Simon speak. Thank you.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Alexa, but we don't allow our partners to charge our residents any more than NYCHA charges for those kinds of things. So there is a charge that NYCHA makes
After a certain
for
amount of years, 1 to 20 years, they're going to start charging medium rent. So they're going to be charging like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. You know.
So that's not permitted. Yeah, that's not going to be permitted under the terms of our program.
I've done a lot of research. I've done my homework. I know what I'm talking about. Thank you.
So Simon, if you can just clarify that, so that there will be no additional charges to the rent. It is basically
no, rent is calculated. Rent is calculated at 30%, exactly the same way it is today, with all the same deductions.
I have the documentation that I got from the computer. I have a copy of it that it says maintenance.
Alexa, maybe you can share that with us, and then we can.
Are you a current Section 8 participant? I know that some residents have.
I'll send you the copy.
Thank you, Alexa.
Okay.
The email.
Thank you. Okay.
I can review that if you send it over. But
the next question goes to Salinas.
Hi, I have 3 questions. Should I ask all of those first?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Fire off.
Okay. The first question is for Simon. We need to see the breakdown of the survey. Why is it taking so long to provide? Why are you withholding it and refuse to show us?
I don't actually have the survey results. You know, it was collected and tabulated by an independent organization to maintain the integrity. So I don't actually have the breakdown.
Who has it?
The Citizens Housing and Planning Council, which was one of the main participants in the working group, they tabulated the results of the survey.
Why isn't anyone providing it for us? We want to see it. We need to see it.
Can it be foiled, Simon?
I don't know. Again, I don't have it. I can follow up, but I'm not able to commit to that at this point.
My next question is for Miguel. After the transition, when the buildings are demolished and Essence takes over with the management, will we be public housing? Yes, or no, we will not be public housing. I want Miguel to answer that question.
We would definitely be 100% public housing, residents in the brand new buildings.
Okay, so Miguel has been saying that in his TA meetings, and he misinforms also, which I guess I'll discuss next week about that. And my third question is actually I'm answering a question that Leila asked. I don't feel like it was answered properly. On the survey,
go ahead, Salinas.
On the survey, it does not say demolish, and Miguel knows that very well. What the word they used was reconstructed, which could be interpreted in any way.
Yeah, thank you, Salinas. So just to clarify, because now I'm confused, will tenants in the new buildings, when it's Section 8, will that qualify as public housing?
No, it will not.
So Leila,
Leila,
as they said, 2,056 units, which is apartments, will be brand new public housing apartments. So every apartment that we all live in today in Elliott and Fulton, when the new construction buildings are built, will be public housing buildings, apartments. It will not be anything to do with the mixed income. Mixed income is totally separate. All the
I understand that, Miguel, but I'm totally confused now because I was always under the impression that Section 8 is public money, but it is actually not public housing.
These are Section 8 vouchers that are created for public housing. It's not the same as the other Section 8 vouchers that people speak about to help them pay for their rent. These are definitely different about Section 8 vouchers. They are assigned to every single apartment for the reconstruction of those apartments.
Okay.
Simon, correct me if I'm.
Okay, thank you. Michael, it looks like you're the last hand up, and I think you want to speak.
Thanks. Thanks. I waited till the end because I knew everybody'd have all these questions that I also had that I wanted clarification on, not for myself, but for everyone else. So they pretty much been answered, you know, as best as anybody can. My one question though is, you know, you talked about the new leases, Simon, and my question is, when can we envision signing those leases? At what point on that timeline that we saw, right? Whether it's the end of the ULURP, when is it? When you guys shake hands with the related in essence, or sometime before that? Just to get an idea of when we will be signing new leases.
So it'll be different depending on which phase of the project you're involved in. So
yeah, that was essentially my question. It's phased. We're going to do it in phases, yeah.
Correct. So
okay.
the earliest people to sign new leases would be Chelsea Addition and Fulton 11 households that have to temporarily move. That would happen towards the end of next year. And then the last group of people to sign new leases would occur sometime around the end of the 2020s.
Right. Yeah, and by the way, you know, talking about how many people are going to be temporarily moved, we're talking about 85 units in Elliott, right?
Correct.
And about 15 or no,
35 at Fulton.
35 at Fulton. So that's
correct.
Actually 5%, I think, Simon, not 6, 5% or so.
Maybe I rounded up.
Yeah. So and those people, you know, at least from the Chelsea Addition, they will probably, many of them, move across the street. You're right, down 27th Street, across 10th Avenue, at a place, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a commercial building at this moment, as far as I can see. For the most part, it's commercial, yeah. So is Related working on getting that building made into a mixed use kind of building or a residential? What's going to happen with that building? You know the one I'm speaking about, right?
Simon or Mona can take this.
Actually, Mike, I'm
I
not
see
sure.
that we have actually 2 additional hands, and then I will cap it at that because it's already 9:17, and I promise it wouldn't go over 2 hours.
Mike, what building are you referring to?
I think the exact address is 5 something West 27th Street, which is currently.
That would be the building where those tenants would be relocated.
Well, so I just want to clarify. Earlier, when we were presenting the different options in the springtime, we were anticipating that some residents would move off-site to other buildings, but now our thinking has changed. We will be able to accommodate the vast majority of the Chelsea Addition and Fulton 11 households on site at their home campus in vacant units.
Okay, and then just to be clear, Simon, those tenants, once it is under Section 8, is it your understanding that they will be public housing tenants? I just want to settle this matter once and for all.
So they'd be funded through the project-based Section 8 program, but you know, people ask us this question all the time. Does this mean I'm no longer a NYCHA resident? And I say, no, you would still be a NYCHA resident living in a NYCHA property, but you're just funded through a different program, all same as public housing through the federal government. So, you know, from the tenant experience, there's really not much of a difference, except that they have a new manager, and they have the repairs.
Okay. The next question goes to Helen, and then we will wrap up with Miriam. Helen.
I'm sorry, Leila, but I don't think that the question was answered. Is it going to be considered public housing or not? That's the question.
It's really how you
Simon,
define, it's how you define it. So again, there is the Section 9 program and there's the Section 8 program. We're just switching from one to the other.
Simon,
but again, still NYCHA property.
This is just double talk. This is a very simple question. Are these public housing units or are they not? I mean, otherwise, you know, well, it depends who's funding it. It depends on this. Is it considered public housing?
It's not funded by the public housing program.
So you're not answering the question.
No, I think the question was just answered. It is not public housing. It is not funded with public housing, right?
It's not funded with public housing. People's conception of public, you know, I don't necessarily, I mean, if you have a concern over the change, I'd be good to understand. But again, it's just transitioning from one federal source to another federal source, and it's still a NYCHA property, so.
Okay, but it would no longer be public housing.
No.
Simon, NYCHA handles Section 8.
No cross conversations. Miguel, go ahead. Miguel, you're on mute.
We receive Section 9 funding now for the NYCHA apartments. With the private public funding, it's Section 8 funding for public housing.
Okay, so you would become similar to Manhattan Plaza, which is Section 8.
No, it's privately based public housing. Section 8 vouchers are created for every single unit in these buildings. These buildings that are newly reconstructed are still public housing buildings. These buildings will be 99 years leased to Related in Essence. And then after 99 years, it gets turned over back to the New York City Housing Authority.
Yeah, Leila, project-based Section 8 means that the voucher is attached to the unit, not to the wallet of the tenant, all right?
And I'll also just add that, you know, NYCHA operates a number of buildings that are project-based Section 8 now. Chelsea, in fact, is a mixed finance building and includes Section 8 vouchers. So would you consider Chelsea, the development, not public housing?
It would, you know, I turn the question back to you, Simon. That's what we're trying to establish. You know, and my understanding is that Chelsea was moved to Section 8 so that a mortgage could be secured.
Yeah, the voucher goes to the unit, not to the individual.
Michael,
Okay.
I would like Simon actually.
All right, go ahead.
Just address that, or, you know, Simon is, you know, it is Section 8 indeed, so that a mortgage could be secured. Is that correct?
The initial plan was similar, you know, but it's still a NYCHA managed property. I think that's the point that we're trying to make.
Okay, but I think that the question is, you know, what is the level of protection for the tenants? You know, I think that
right, and that's what Miguel. That's
has
what
a
Miguel
different layer of protection and rights than a Section 8 tenant.
Not a Section 8.
No. So project-based Section 8, if you transition a project-based Section 8 through the Pact program, you have the same rights that you possess under the Section 9 program. That's guaranteed by HUD.
Okay, all right, so at least we have clarity on that. Moving on, I really want to get to Helen and Miriam. I know that not everybody is going to be satisfied with all the answers. We're really trying very, very hard to, you know, get to the core of these issues that are complicated. So thank you all for your patience. Helen.
Okay, Helen Rosenberg. I have two questions. One is, if it's, I'm sorry for the beep, I don't know how to turn that off. If an apartment transitions, okay, so a tenant moves back, has all the supposed to have all the protections that they currently have, then they leave the apartment, a new tenant comes in under Section 8, would they have less rights than the original first tenants in the apartment who came over from Section 9? I don't know if I'm saying that clearly.
Yeah,
And then
I think this is the question that we've
I'm
been
understanding,
grappling
yeah.
with
So
for the past 10 minutes.
No,
Or-
no.
I-
Once the apartment becomes vacant, you've got an original tenant who transitioned over from Chelsea or Elliott into the new apartment. They're supposed to be guaranteed the same rights, and I'm going to come to the second question about that. But eventually, that apartment will become vacant. It's a 100-year lease. Will the subsequent tenants who are coming in under Section 8 rather than transitioning over from with a guarantee from Section 9, but supposedly guarantee the same rights under Section 8. But the subsequent
yes.
tenants, will they
Yes.
have the same rights?
Yes, and they'll sign the same lease that the original tenant signed.
Okay, and then the next question was, and you had a chart, and I didn't write down the exact words, about some of the same rights that people had, and it did say tenants will be able to come back, but there were 2 asterisks about with an appropriate household size. And I had a couple comments about that. If somebody came, would somebody possibly, let's say, came into a 1-bedroom apartment with their husband, maybe with 1 or 2 children, now they're by themselves, would an quote appropriate size for them now be a studio? Because as people get older, there's a chance that they're going to need 24-hour aides, and that would be very difficult in a 1-bedroom or and what would happen in a studio. And also, I am also thinking that that low-income households, more than middle and upper income households, may need to utilize an extra bedroom or 2 because their family members, as if they are also low income, are going to be in a more precarious state and may need to move back to their original apartment. And I've read that there's a lot of doubling up in NYCHA housing because of the terrible housing shortage. I also just want to acknowledge that NYCHA is in a terrible position.
Helen, please wrap up so that we can.
So the question is, what is a quote appropriate size, and how small will those, how many bedrooms will that be for the current household size of people that have to relocate?
So we and the development team have made a commitment that there would be no studios in the NYCHA replacement buildings. So the smallest unit size would be a 1-bedroom. And in terms of determining an appropriately sized apartment, that's all stipulated by HUD. And the requirements under the project-based Section 8 program are the same, with some few minor differences to the Section 9 program. So there wouldn't be any substantial difference between the two. Now, if somebody has a home health aide or has a reasonable accommodation and requires an extra bedroom or a different unit for whatever reason, that can be addressed and honored as part of the process of matching people with new units.
But what if their family members have to move back because of the economy? Would they be entitled to then move to a larger apartment?
So once you're in a unit, if your family and you're trying to add people to your household, but the composition won't match the size of your unit, they cannot move in with you because it wouldn't be a compatible household to unit match.
So Helen, one of the issues that we have, for example, one of the residents mentioned it earlier, there's families that are doubling up, exactly like you said. Unfortunate people that are single, 1 person, even if they have a whole family, have 4 bedrooms, and NYCHA has refused to enforce the HUD regulation. So people like the families that are doubling up have the opportunity to get into those 4 bedrooms. Once this private-public partnership happens, we're hoping that the new management team finds a way to right-size tenants who are taking advantage of 4 bedrooms where other families need those 4 bedrooms and not getting the opportunity.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. The last question goes to Miriam. Miriam, go ahead. You're on mute.
Am I?
Yeah, we
I
can
muted
hear
myself
you.
also. Okay, I wanted to be clear how affordability is determined, what population, what income group is used. I think I heard that it was based on NYCHA regulations. Could you clarify that, Simon?
So all existing residents would be entitled to a new unit in the replacement building regardless of their income, and their rent would be 30% of their adjusted gross household income. Any new admissions, so if a unit becomes vacant after the new buildings are constructed, those apartments must be leased to a Section 8 qualifying household off of the NYCHA Section 8 waiting list. And the income requirement to be on that wait list is the cutoff is 50% of area median income, which today is probably around $50,000 or $60,000 for a family of 4. So that would be the income qualification for any new units that become available.
Area median income meaning Chelsea? Because
no, there's a
Chelsea
there's a published area median income for the entire city. I can
Yeah.
share the chart with Leila after the meeting.
Yeah, and we can help. I mean, it is really technical and complicated to understand. It's not easy to read, but you know, I think that the Chelsea Reform Democratic Club can do a little bit of training and you know presenting to the community so that you guys are able to understand that, because it's really not easy. Thank you so much, Miriam. Just as you know, to sort of like wrap up where we started, according to the Related website, so it's their official website, Liberty Square is in one of their you know, in the portfolio of one of their buildings. So if they are not the developer of this particular property, I think they should really update their website, because it's you know, tremendously confusing. So I think that concludes this evening. I want to thank Simon and Mona, Miguel, Michael, and all the participants. I know that, you know, this is a very, very complicated issue, very contentious. I really urge NYCHA to hear, you know, from these events and others that, you know, there's a great deal of opposition to the project. You know, the public review process is going to start. I think that folks are going to be very engaged, and I really hope, and you know, our club and our community hopes that the project can be shaped so that it better reflects the needs of this community. You know, I think we all very much look forward to the beginning of the public review process. Thanks again to our Vice President, Bert Lazarin. We were also joined tonight by my co-district leader, David Warren. Thank you, David. Thank you to the CRDC Executive Committee, in particular, Roberta Gelb and Lizette Colon, as well as Tito Delgado. Once again, CRDC will host their holiday party on Sunday, December 3rd, starting at 3 p.m. You can find all the information on our website, crdc.com or org. Google it, hopefully you'll find it, and we really look forward to seeing all of you. This event is entirely free and open to the public. We hope to see all our neighbors. Happy holidays, everyone. We hope to see you on Sunday. We also hope to see you again on Monday at 7 p.m. We will be holding another program where we'll continue to talk about this issue and this project. This time, folks who are opposed to the development will have an opportunity to take the speaker seat and discuss further this issue. So once again, thank you so much, and I wish you all a very, very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Leila.